honestly, I realized living a purposeless life is torture.
Right.
It's the worst ever. It wasn't until I just kept wasting money and just doing random things because I was living in the moment.
Okay.
I remember I bought a motorcycle because my one friend rode one. And of course, I bought like the most ridiculous one you get, just a race bike. It's not practical. It's very uncomfortable. It's super fast.
Love it.
And it wasn't until I was like flying down the highway at like 300 kilometers an hour that I realized something's wrong. Because why am I not afraid?
Right. And so would you say now you've found your purpose?
I would say so, yeah. I realized the power of role models because I wish I had one to look up to and to really like model after.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my purpose is. I want to help lead people and light a way and help them flourish.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Flourish podcast. We're so excited that you're joining us as we're talking about flourishing in life. We're talking about flourishing in business. We're talking about flourishing in relationships. We're talking about flourishing in your physical health in every area that is so important. And I'm really excited to have with me as our guest today, none other than Dylan.
Thank you, Abe, for having me. It was a little bit of a surprise, but I'm happy to be here.
That's right. We just went down to the street and we just grabbed somebody who looked handsome. And you have to admit, he looks pretty good, doesn't he? I'm just joking. Dylan and I, we've known each other now for a little bit. And Dylan Campio, right? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, Campio.
Campio. Okay. Thank you for that, because I'm always trying my best to pronounce people's name correctly. So, Dylan, actually, I think it's awesome that you're on our podcast today because, in my view, especially for young people, you have a great message of flourishing. And it's a message, I'm going to say just what I know of your story, flourishing, through some tough times and flourishing with maybe, even some influences, some distractions, some things that maybe pulled you here and there. But here you are continuing to pursue. So why don't you just kind of take us back to the beginning? Tell us a little bit about your story.
To the beginning. Well, all started from a First Nation reserve, Sucker Creek First Nation, Northern Alberta, really small community. So that's where I grew up. As a child, it was pretty good, just hang out with the kids. It wasn't until it got later that, kids started doing a little kind of straight off the path. They started doing some things that I wasn't really into. My mom told me not to. Things like breaking into houses, doing drugs, alcohol, you name it. So I kind of closed off and I kind of just became a video gamer.
Right.
Other things like that, I really did enjoy school, so I did well there.
Yeah.
But then video games did take away from there, and I kind of lost my drive. And then I was just kind of lost in limbo for quite a while there.
Okay. So you grew up in a First Nations community, and for people who may be tuning in from outside of Canada, that it represents sort of our Indigenous peoples here in Canada, First Peoples kind of, and it's sort of, you called it Sucker Creek. I've been to your community many times, beautiful community, beautiful people, but really small, right? And I guess like a lot of rural communities, but actually I shouldn't be too hard on rural communities because I grew up in the city and got involved in some bad activity myself. Like there's not a lot to do.
Right.
And so there was a bit of a pull into some crime and some bad behavior. Is that sort of correct?
Yeah, I feel like when people don't have their vision or like a strong role model to look at, they kind of just do whatever feels in the moment, and it could lead to just a bunch of randomness.
Yeah, and then your mom sort of stepped up and said, what did she say to you?
What did she say to me? She just always told me to live on the right path of life. We're very spiritual.
Love that. And you. I say this because Dylan said this before on stages in front of hundreds of people. He's a self-described mama's boy, and so you love your mom, right?
Yeah, I do. She's she's a superhero, honestly.
Yeah.
Single mother.
Yeah.
She did it all. She worked. She got her degree at university, and she was able to provide for me and my two sisters.
Yeah, and she's still working a pretty high-level job and working hard to provide for the family, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, and that's great. I mean, there's nothing more precious than those family relationships, right? So talk about like video games. Like how old were you? What was some of the games maybe you got into? What was some of the stuff that was kind of around that for you? Not just the bad. I mean, obviously like there was an appeal there. So maybe just take us through, like if somebody's watching this and they never experienced that world, like what was going on for you?
Yeah. Well, I did grow up with video games. I remember when I was young, like 4 or 5, I used to have like a little PlayStation, but it wasn't really addicting. I just kind of did it here and there. I would much rather play outside and hang out with people and ride my bike.
Right.
I didn't really get bad until like high school. I'd say grade 10 is when I found a video game that just spiked my dopamine. It was all I could think about. Like the highs were so high, and I just didn't want to stop. So it definitely pulled away from the real world, and I just closed off.
And how long did that closing off, like how long did that last for you?
Yeah, I'd say like it was like on or off. It was like a push pull. Started in grade 10, and I'd say probably when I was like 21. So yeah, that'd be like what, 5 years, 6 years.
Okay. And when you talk about dopamine, like tell us about that. Like what is dopamine? What is dopamine? And what does that have to do with like video games of all things?
Yeah, I've actually done a bit of research. I read a couple of books. I know there's one book called Dopamine Nation, and I know Andrew Huberman talks a lot about it. Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting. So the way dopamine works, it's kind of like that pleasure reward system in your brain. Where a lot of people are today is they chase the cheap highs. So like sugar, social media, you name it, it'll spike your dopamine. Mm-hmm. But after a spike, it always is a crash. You can crave more.
Right. And so for you as that young kid growing up, what was the dopamine and like the experience of video games? What was it doing for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, I was pretty isolated because I did close off from my community just because I wanted to live on the right path of life and not stress out my mother because she had enough on her plate.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I was like, well, it's better if I'm home.
Yeah.
But when you're home, I was bored. So video games just filled the void.
Yeah. And so fast forward to now, like what is different for you now? What has changed for you?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I realized living a purposeless life is torture.
Right.
It's the worst ever. It wasn't until I just kept wasting money and just doing random things because I was living in the moment.
Okay.
I remember I bought a motorcycle because my one friend rode one. And of course I bought like the most ridiculous one you get, just a race bike. It's not practical. It's very uncomfortable. It's super fast.
Love it.
And it wasn't until I was like flying down the highway at like 300 kilometers an hour that I realized something's wrong. Because why am I not afraid?
Right. And so would you say now you've found your purpose?
I would say so, yeah. I realized the power of role models because I wish I had one to look up to and to really like model after.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my purpose is. I want to help lead people and light a way and help them flourish. And
that's awesome, man. So we're like, because we talked a bit about the past and a little bit about the present. Like if you were to close your eyes and imagine, like, where are you? Where's Dylan 5-10 years from now? What's happening for you?
5-10 years from now.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I'd say what I'd love to do is do a lot of mentorship, leading. I can see myself having like strength camps with like a bunch of kids coming together and just growing a building, getting out of your comfort zone. Right on. I can see myself going to communities on stage and just really sharing my story and just helping just people see a path and believe in themselves.
Right. So I love that, man, like I do. And there's probably no one I could say, see that doing more than you. Mm-hmm. And we've known each other now for about a year, and it doesn't mean like I know everything about you, but definitely all of that potential capacity and passion is in you for sure. All of that ability. In my career, as you know, I've been really blessed to spend a lot of time with First Nations communities. Mm-hmm. Of course, unlike you, obviously, I didn't grow up in a First Nations community, and I'm not a First Nations person in terms of how I would identify. I think one of the problems is maybe a lot of people listening to this podcast are listening to people in the media, like if I can just be really blunt, because that was the big thing I discovered when I started actually going to these communities, is what I was hearing from the media of sort of the elites was quite a bit different than actually how the people were. Mm-hmm. I was actually, the first couple of times I went, I was afraid because I had heard so many horrible stories. And I thought that like literally everybody must be a drug addict and everybody must be engaging in domestic violence and everybody like that was, I had just read like Canadian newspapers and that was what was in my mind from that. Mm-hmm. They didn't paint, I think, a fulsome picture. Of course, in every community, like First Nations or not, all of those things exist. That is for sure. But, you having, you are First Nations, you're Cree, you're proud of it, you should be. And these communities, what's happening right now, mainly like I'll say with young people, because that would be the generation you would know the most about. Mm-hmm. Certainly any perspective you have on the older or the elder generation would be great too. But, just as a First Nations person and your life is moving forward and life is working for you. What do you feel is happening right now?
Yeah. So I'm with you. Like a lot of the people, they're good people. They have a kind heart. Where they might go astray, where you hear that on the media, is just not having a purpose, not having that role model, right? So when you kind of wake up every day and live in the moment, there's not a lot of vision or like direction. And so if you're bored, you just kind of do whatever. And a lot of times that's not always the best thing to do.
Right.
And so where I see young people now is, they're kind of afraid of the world in a sense, especially for Native people. There is a lot of anxiety, a lot of things holding them back. So I feel like they are pretty closed off.
Right.
Like maybe they're closer in their community, but they are closed off from like the bigger world.
Right.
And you see that in a lot of ways, whether it's through like video gaming or through other substance abuse, just to really detach.
Right. And so if there's a young First Nations person watching today or listening in, like what advice would you give them? Because your advice, I think, is so much more important than mine, because you have lived experience. What is your thoughts? And I know empathy is definitely something you have, but what would you say to them?
Yeah, like I'd say that you are very capable. Like there isn't anything holding you back. You put your mind to it, you can achieve anything. Like it does take discipline, it does take consistency, but you are not less capable than anyone else. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Right on, man. So what have been some of the most important principles that have kind of flipped the switch for you from that kid who was kind of like self-described, a bit addicted to video games, whatever, and now where you're moving forward in your life and you have a vision for your future? What were some of the things that helped lead you to that place?
Right. Yeah, when I was like lost in limbo, I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand the world. I came across this really great quote that just changed everything. It goes like, if you don't understand the world, read. And if you don't understand yourself, write.
Okay, cool.
So I was fortunate enough that I was working at a job where I could just kind of listen to an audible all the time. And so I just kept consuming books. And the first 10 books, I wouldn't say like changed me.
Right.
It wasn't until you find that one that clicks.
Right.
And then it was about people skills. And I just ran with it.
And that shifted for you. And would you say that was partially because you had so many years of being a little bit isolated and now the idea of what it would look like to connect with people, is that kind of what happened there?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the beauty of learning about people's skills is that there's people everywhere if you look for them.
Right.
And so I can learn, read, and practice so that I'd retain the information.
Yeah.
And that dream of, wow, I can go from this like awkward person to someone who connects.
Yeah. And connects in a deep way, right? So I'm happy to say, friends, that Dylan and I we have done some facilitation together. My vision, our vision in flourishing, certifiedflourishingcoach.com, has been to be a part of helping to support the development of First Nations people to facilitate and to become coaches. And I say that just to say that Dylan is one of them who is totally, catching that vision, and he's sort of writing his own ticket around where he wants to develop and how he wants to help and engage communities. And so, next week, actually, or a week and a half from now, we're going to be heading to a First Nations community in northern Saskatchewan. We're so excited about it. We're going to be spending a week with precious folks who are trying to figure out a lot of the things that you're talking about. And so, do you want to just tell the audience a little bit about what that means to you, like being able to go to different communities? Now, this will be our second one. So Dylan is early in the game, but he's definitely going to be doing far more as time goes on. Like, what does that represent? How does that feel for you?
Yeah, it's very exciting. Like I said, I was very isolated. So I'm really excited to go to different communities, to hear their story and learn and understand, and maybe see some ways that I can help or provide some inside information, and vice versa. I've been to Onion Lake a couple of times, and it's such a great community there. Like they really truly believe in like building capacity within their own community. Like they put so much effort and money and everything into education. They have some really great schools there. And I remember I was there once for a volleyball tournament.
Sweet.
And you see it.
Nice.
So I'm excited to get back to that community and just kind of bask in
Maybe we'll be able to put a couple of pickup games of volleyball together too. That would be cool, eh?
Well, they go hard in volleyball.
They do,
We're
right?
gonna have to bring our A game.
Gonna have to bring my my cup and my all of my protective gear. Well, thanks for that, Dylan. It's really exciting, to think about. And if you want to directly contact Dylan, which I think would be awesome, you can actually email him at his email is dylan@certifiedflourishingcoach.com. That's dylan@certifiedflourishingcoach.com. And then you also have a social media handle or two. So do you want to tell us about that and where people can follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, probably one of the best ways to connect with me would be through Instagram. It's one of the platforms I use the most. It's just Dylan Strong with the underscore at the end.
Dylan Strong underscore at the end. And that's actually part of your name, right?
Yeah, oddly enough, my mom when I was born decided to give me a middle name Strong.
It's awesome. Isn't that cool? Like imagine if your mom had given you the middle name Week. That would be kind of hard, right, on the heart. But you are strong, and I want to thank you, Dylan, for taking some time here today out of your busy day. Any final thoughts for anyone who might be tuning in today?
Yep, life is exciting right now.
Yeah.
Today is the best time to grab knowledge and to develop for tomorrow. So
Right.
I'm excited to hear and support everyone else's journey. So.
Love that. Well, hey, guys and gals, thanks so much for tuning in to the Flourish podcast. Thank you, Dylan Campiu. It's so great to have you here. Let's go crush it together and let's keep flourishing. Please do give us a rating, a review, a follow, subscribe. Let everybody know how much you're enjoying this. And we'll see you in our next episode. Take care.